Okay, welcome to the Brand, Sweat, and Tears podcast. I am your host, Dave Oldham, and today I have one of my longest and best friends, Bubba Page, on as the guest. And Bubba and I met, it was like 125 years ago, if I'm being like very specific.
I think that was about
very
right.
accurate.
Yeah.
It seems like it was a long time ago. I can't even remember actually when we first met, the year. I mean, I remember kind of the scenario. We're both startup founders, and Bubba was building this thing called Launch Leads. I was building a company called O-Codes, and we met and kind of hit it off and became good friends. And then years later, Bubba invited me to join him and work in one of his companies, which we'll talk about that for just a second. But Bubba is a phenomenal founder, one of the most energetic and kind people I know. And he's doing some really, really cool stuff. And he's been involved in different types of businesses, which I thought would be really interesting to kind of talk about as far as this podcast goes. And then we'll end up with what you're kind of currently doing. But if we rewind the clock, where did your entrepreneurial story kind of start? And let's fast forward like through the evolution of Bubba the entrepreneur.
Well, first, let me give a shout out. I love you, Dave. Come on.
There we go.
There's some love right here.
How much do I owe you for that, Dave?
You know what? Everybody who's watching, you guys are watching or listening, Dave is just a good human. You're a good soul.
Oh, thanks, man.
And I honestly, we met, I think it was like 2009, 10-ish, when we were both doing one of our first gigs.
Yeah.
And yeah, my first business that I started out of college was a service-based company, technically outsourced sales. Today they call it like a sales development rep or a business development rep, SDR, BDR. And we set appointments for people in the tech space. Mm-hmm. Crazy business. I can't believe that it worked, but it did. I ended up selling that in 2020. But the services side of that business, I ended up sharing equity with a handful of people who helped me to get it started. And then I hired a CEO in 2014 so that I could start the venture-backed software company, which is where Dave and I got to actually work together.
That's right.
And which was magical in its experience. Unfortunately, the business didn't pan out like we had hoped.
Yeah.
But from a learning experience and just, it was awesome to be able to work together. Like there's just, when you work with somebody at that intimate level, you get to see all kinds of the person who they are. And that's why I can legitimately say you're such a good person.
Besides my
went
wife,
through good and bad.
Yeah, you know me better than most. And that is cool. I reciprocate that. It is a really fantastic thing in the entrepreneur space to be able to walk away from a failed business and both of us to say we would work with each other again in a heartbeat, right?
Totally.
Like that's a cool experience to come out the other side of that and be like, oh, I would work with Bubba again in a heartbeat.
I think it's rare. I honestly, because partnerships, they're hard. It's like a marriage where marriages are hard. But we found the best in each other. And that's what I thought was amazing. I always looked to you with your incredible expertise and experience that I knew I didn't have. And you reciprocated the same. And it was this really cool, anyway, it was fun. It was magical for sure. Yeah. And I'm glad you're here where you landed. And now I'm doing new stuff. But if we talk about, so service-based company first, giving out equity to key team members, I gave that equity out first because I wanted them to be, the incentives to be aligned. Mm-hmm. And in 2014, when I hired the CEO, now I had tried with two other people and it didn't pan out. They didn't end up staying. It wasn't either the right fit or they got picked off by another company and I couldn't even compete with how much they were going to get paid. But when I found the final one, who I ended up selling the business to, gave him 12% equity in the business, plus a pretty good sized salary, a legit salary, I would say. And it worked because he had that incentive. And with most equity, you have it, oh my gosh, now what's the word? Vest over 40-year time frame. Yeah. And he ended up buying it in the 5.5 year, you know. So he had vested equity and then acquired the business. But then when we did the tech company, raised venture capital from some awesome guys out there. Peterson Ventures, shout out. Kickstart, Seed Fund, shout out.
Love both of those guys.
Techstars, went through the Techstars program in Boulder, Colorado, and shout out, they were investors. Tall Wave Capital out of Arizona. Still have relationships with these guys. They're still such good people. And I felt such a blessing when we ended up having to shut down the business, which was devastating. If you've ever had to do this, oh my gosh, it hurts. It put me into probably my first experience of what depression felt like.
Yeah.
I lost a lot of my self-confidence. I lost a lot of who I thought I was. Now, the error that I had made was putting myself as the business or whatever. Like I inserted myself too much. Mm-hmm. And I had to take a step back and say, it's not, I am not the business. Mm-hmm. We did everything in our power to try and make that thing go. And we had some interesting false positives.
Yeah.
Where we had revenue coming in, but anyway, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. That's a huge rabbit hole we could go down.
Oh, we could go down that for a long time. Well, next time.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother podcast. But I remember when I was talking to you, Dave, and I knew I didn't want to do this alone. Mm-hmm. The first company I did essentially alone until I brought that CEO. Mm-hmm. I had some incredible operators that helped me, and I gave them equity too along the business. But like when I was talking to you and essentially recruiting you to come, you were already this experienced founder. You had already done tech. You had already built an amazing product that was succeeding in the marketplace. You were unfortunately coming out of a pretty rough relationship with your old partners. Yeah. And not that we have to go down that
co-founders
path either.
That I would not want to work with again.
And so I'm sure there was some trauma, right, from that experience. And yet we had these conversations, and we didn't have that many. I mean, if you think about it, it was maybe 3 to 5 meetings or conversations, and I knew I needed your talent and expertise. I knew that we had already this baseline friendship, but then giving away equity, I felt like being generous, and I hope you felt the same way, that was the only way to create the right partnership from the start.
Yeah.
That it wasn't this like hard-nosed negotiation. I wasn't trying to do these like give and take tactics or anything like that. It was just like, look, I like you. I love what you have from an expertise standpoint. I want to share this equity with you.
Yeah.
Because then we can really build this thing together.
Yeah.
And I felt that way.
Yeah. So did I. I mean, I want to give you props because I asked for a lot. I mean, I basically asked for like equal equity, and you had already been working on it for a while. But to me, it was, I'm a founder myself. I had other ideas. I had other things that I thought I would go work on. I really liked you. And so I was like, man, from a co-founder perspective, that's a huge attractive thing to like, I think I could jam with this guy. Your strengths complement some of my weaknesses and vice versa. I think we'd pair really well together. And I think we, proved that out. I think that we did work really well together, even though the business wasn't ultimately successful. We did accomplish a lot together, I feel like. But the huge test to me was, okay, we'll see, because you had been saying like, I want somebody that really is, as committed to this thing, as passionate about this thing, as devoted to this thing as I am. I want a true co-founder. And I said, okay, here's what I need to make that happen from an ownership standpoint. And you thought about it, I think not even for a long time, maybe a couple of days, and said, okay, let's do it. It wasn't this huge, long, drawn out thing. And I still tell my wife, I'm like, the fact that Bubba was so generous, and that gave me all of the confidence that I needed, that you really wanted a co-founder and wanted me to work with you like that. I wasn't less than you. I wasn't going to be your employee. I wasn't going to be your sidekick. It was going to be like, hey, we're going to do this together. And that was huge. It was super meaningful to me, and I think started us off with a tremendous amount of trust.
Yeah.
And for me, I was like emotionally all in, right? Yeah. Like I'm like, okay, this is it. Like we're going to do whatever it takes. And we poured a lot of blood, sweat, and tears.
And we did. Blood, sweat, and tears, guaranteed. Yeah, this is, if anybody's listening and you've thought about, like, do I bring on a co-founder, or how do I bring on a co-founder? How do I do this? What you're hearing, it ended up being magical because of that mutual respect. We did have a yin and yang, skill sets wise. And I think that the idea about being generous with our emotional, our emotional, physical time, everything was like we were blended. Mm-hmm. And then for me, I knew I had already done a business by myself.
Yeah.
And not obviously by myself. I had a whole team of people, but from an ownership standpoint, essentially by myself. And it wasn't as fun.
Mm-hmm.
I knew I wanted to do this with someone, and it worked out amazing. It was so cool.
You know, it's funny. Some of the investors that we're really good friends with still admit to me that even though they love me, like that they're like, we told Bubba, like, no, don't do that. Like, that's crazy. Because investors have seen lots of scenarios where that's gone south.
Yeah.
Now, there was vesting and like, you know, you had all the appropriate kind of fail safes in place that I wasn't just going to immediately walk away with like half the business and leave you stranded. But still, it was a pretty big risk on your part. And they joke and say like, yeah, we told him not to do it. He still did it. But I think the point that you were trying to make that I want to confirm as the recipient of that is that's what it took. And I knew that you were committed to me being just as successful as you were. And it didn't make me feel like we were on different levels or whatever. So it was really critical, I think, for setting a really strong foundation for our working relationship, which was fantastic.
No question. I look at now when that one didn't go as planned. I ended up joining with my wife, and we ended up building the Page Company. Mm-hmm. And she had already had this social following. She had already built a product for her audience, budgetbootcamp.com. She had already had something rolling, and I had been a supporter and an advisor, let's say.
Yeah.
And then she wanted to, throw some gas on it and really go. And so we built a team and process and people and multiple products around. So it was interesting. You have this B2B service-based company, which is where I started. Mm-hmm. Then you and I do this, this tech, venture-backed tech software company in more of a B2B type place. And then I jump into consumer products.
Yeah.
And doing it with an influencer, now my wife, but still in the influencer type space. Mm-hmm. And the learnings of each individual one was so interesting. Mm-hmm. Now with that business, we didn't bring in any outside partners. It was just she and I, but we were doing it together. She obviously had been doing it years before, and I haven't been involved in a couple of years either since then. But the consumer space is so fascinating because we also got an opportunity to get involved with this company called Gab Wireless. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to become an investor because I had started angel investing since like 2015, very, very small things, but 2015. And if I'm remembering the timing right, I wanted to invest in this company. It was safe technology for kids. It totally fit our audience, our values. We have 8 kids. So, we wanted to make sure our kids could be safe with their technology. So when we wrote a little angel check into that business, I tried to figure out a way. They wanted us to become an affiliate and to promote their product.
Angel invested first.
Angel invested first.
Okay.
So wrote a check in as an investor, and they were then pitching us like, hey, we know you love us because you just wrote a check in. Would you promote this brand to your audience? And I'm thinking, well, of course. I love this business. I want to promote it. Mm-hmm. And then I said, look, and they said, look, we'll pay you commissions, affiliate commission. And at the time, we didn't necessarily need that cash flow. Mm-hmm. And so I just said, well, hey, look, I love the business so much. Could we convert anything that we made in commission into equity, into that same round?
Yeah.
And they put in some fail safes too of, well, only up to this amount and only for this long in order for it to be in that same round.
Yeah.
We ended up crushing it. Between my wife's audience and my audience going out there, and we really did a good job. And we did 100% of my original investment.
Wow.
Let's hear, am I doing the math right? 100 or 150%? Anyway, that we got additionally put into that seed round.
As commissions of selling phones through your social channels with your promotion codes, you generated as much in equity as you had originally put in. In the form of cash. So you doubled your investment.
Yeah, doubled the investment. I mean, technically, I'm trying to think if I can. So it was like $25K check as an angel, and we earned an extra $50K in commissions.
Wow.
So if I'm doing the math right, I'm sure I'm wrong.
200%.
200%. Thank you.
Yeah.
Spotlight was getting to me. I couldn't do the math. No. So it was about 200%. So now we've got this, for me, a good sized chunk of an angel investment.
Yeah.
And we had this conversion of influencer effort into equity. I hadn't heard of anyone doing that before. I've heard of celebrities getting equity in companies because of their status or following or whatnot. But like influencers, that hadn't really happened back then. And now I look back, and that investment is if not surpassed, but I think it's 20x what we invested. 20x. Wow. The valuation of the business.
All right.
That's not bad.
That's huge.
And so the concept, if there's any influencers listening here, right? Or entrepreneurs for that matter, if you're an entrepreneur with a company, being able to hand out equity to key people, which may be an influencer or a celebrity of one kind, or even just top tier customers, you can see the value from an influencer. I'm a lifelong partner of Gab now. I will always be promoting them because I own part of this company. And luckily they've done well and continue to grow. But this equity piece is so valuable because of this lifelong partnership. Most influencers, when you're working, now that I've worked with influencers for over a decade, you pay them a sponsorship, they'll promote it that one time and never talk to you about you again. If they're an affiliate, maybe they'll continue to promote it because they're getting paid every time they get a commission. But an investor, they're all in. Now, getting an influencer to invest doesn't happen very often. Most because influencers may not even know what a cap table is a lot of times. And I hope to be educating influencers to help them to diversify their assets. And getting paid commission or sponsorship all the time is great. But then what are you doing with that cash? Don't just increase your lifestyle. Don't just get the bigger house, the better car, whatever. Start diversifying. And if you can, try and negotiate to get some equity into some of these businesses you're promoting.
Even if it's some cash and some equity. Right?
Absolutely. And when we did it, it was a huge hassle. All the paperwork and legal stuff, and neither party knew what we were doing because neither one of us had ever done this before. And Awesome has solved that problem. Which is so cool.
It's so awesome.
So cool. Sure, literally any business, if I understand this correctly, can hand out, can exchange equity in a fairly automated way through your technology that allows for these lifelong partnerships to occur. Whether it's a key customer, an influencer, a celebrity, whatever it is, or partner, there's ways of exchanging that equity. And I think that can create such an immense amount of value for both parties. It's a win-win for everybody involved.
So I got to explain to the audience why Bubba's so passionate about this, because you've been on the giving end and the receiving end of this. But here's the backstory. A little over a year ago, I was doing some consulting and was kind of semi-retired. I was doing some consulting for a couple of different companies. I get this call from Bubba, and Bubba says, "Hey, what are you doing right now?" And I was looking around like, I was like sitting on my deck, maybe just chilling. And I know he's like, work-wise, like, what's occupying your time right now? And I said, well, I'm consulting some companies. I've got some ideas and stuff. And he said, I want to introduce you to an idea and a company that you were planning on or thinking about investing in. Kickstart was investing in it or thinking about investing. I think they'd put in some and were thinking about doing some more. And you said, I want you to hear this pitch, and then I want you to meet this team, and I want you to talk to Dalton at Kickstart about this, right? And you started telling me this, and you told me it just as passionately as you described it right there. So this is not a paid promotion. Like, this is how I got involved with Awesome. Bubba, my good friend, calls me, and he said, this is one of the coolest ideas I've heard in a long time. He tells me, companies can create a small pool of equity that they can use to reward and motivate anyone who's helping them grow their business. That can be influencers. That can be referral partners. It can be agencies. It can be their law firm, their accounting firm. It can even be their employees, because traditionally that employee equity that you were talking about is almost always isolated to like a small group of just the senior leadership, right? The co-founders, maybe the senior leadership team. It's hard. Not from a philosophical standpoint, from a paperwork and legal and accounting and tax compliance standpoint, to give that out to like a large number of employees as your company starts to grow. So this company, Awesome, which at the time was a different name, but we rebranded a while ago to Awesome. This company has solved that problem in a really cool, unique way. And then when you said, I think you said the words, it's like Venmo for equity, I was like, oh my gosh, like that's a game changer. So I got excited about the idea. I came and I met some of the founders, the original team. So I'm not a founder of Awesome. I can't claim that credit, but I joined these brilliant individuals who had kind of created this concept. And then Kickstart invested another chunk of money. And we were off to the races. And very shortly after I joined, we were kind of, the previous name had some potential trademark conflicts and some other issues with it. It was actually not a bad name. We can say it here, Pi-Fi. But we needed kind of one that had a clear path from a trademark standpoint and growth standpoint. I had the .com AWSM for Awesome. I was thinking about using
really
it for something else. My cousin and my brother and I, we were in a business idea together and kind of had that domain. And so I had access to it. I bought them out and said, hey guys, I think we can use this domain. And so that's where they loved the idea. It's been fun because whenever we explain what we do to people, they're like subconscious and like kind of natural reaction is they say, oh, that's really awesome.
That's awesome.
And I'm like, gotcha. We lean into that pretty hard. It literally is awesome. But you're the one you're the reason why I'm here at this company. And so I have so much gratitude for that because I have loved this team. I have loved working on this idea. And I see why you were so passionate about it. And you're kind of right in the middle of that because after you kind of built this business with your wife and, you guys had created like multiple consumer products. There were like the trainings and the workbooks and all of these things from like family budgeting
to productivity, cooking.
Cooking and grocery management, like all these cool things. You guys even did like a baby bag, like a Moses bag for babies, like all these cool things together. And then you decided to start your own like syndicate, right?
Yeah.
Which is influencer.vc.
Almost. Influence.vc.
Influence.vc. Okay, tell me
You're
how
not
that
the only
started.
one.
Like, why did you decide to get into that? And then I think it ties into what we're talking about is, well, I'll let you explain.
Yeah. So influence.vc essentially was, I was taking my angel investing experiences, which I loved. I loved writing checks into these companies where I could possibly help them. Whether it's with strategic connections or expertise, especially working with influencers. Mm-hmm. Most venture capitalists have never worked with influencers before. And so when they invited me to come into the round, it was like, okay, Bubba, we could really use your help to understand how to work with these folks. Mm-hmm. And so I started getting invited into these deals, and I'd have friends being like, hey, why didn't you tell me about this deal that you got into?
They're mad that they missed out.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh, well, that's cool. And they're like, why don't you start a fund? I'm like, I don't want to do a fund. Mm-hmm. That seems like a long commitment, and I don't know what I'm going to do in my next whatever. And as I ended up doing this like Venn diagram of where are my skills, my assets, what do I like to do, who do I want to hang out with, and it kind of blended in the middle, and it worked that being an investor, that I can then bring a group of people to invest along with me. Mm-hmm. They call that a syndicate. It really fit that Venn diagram of where I wanted to be. I got to hang out with the right people. I love entrepreneurs. I love hanging out. A lot of my friends are investors, and they've been entrepreneurs, now investors. And I love the VC space. We raise venture. I did bootstrap, so I have both the experience from bootstrapping and raising. It just felt like the right idea. Mm-hmm. And then I knew that I couldn't, my little 25 to 50K checks that I was writing personally in these angel deals, I knew that I could get into some opportunities, but if I could come and say, well, hey, we can actually do maybe $500,000 to $1 million deals, that I'd get invited to even better opportunities, along with this expertise that, top tier investors like Pelion or like Menlo Ventures right now, we're co-investors into a deal. Sequoia wrote a scout check into one of the deals we're doing.
Yeah. So I'm
getting into some pretty good deals.
These massive firms.
And I'm tiny.
Fast moving deals.
I'm this tiny guy right here in Utah. Jason Calacanis has been an inspiration to me. He and I have never, well, technically we have met once, but it was like way back in Quotadec days in 2014.
Yeah.
And but he's got this massive group of angel investors. He does 100 deals a year, something like 11,000 angel investors. It's crazy.
Yeah.
He's been doing it for 20 plus years, right? This guy's been around the block.
Yeah.
And he's kind of helped me to have a vision of, okay.
And now he can almost get into like any deal.
He can get into any deal he wants.
Yeah.
Literally any deal he wants, he can get into it. I have no doubt he could. And I see a clear path to where I can do that. And he's on the Bay, in the Bay Area, Palo Alto-ish area. I'm here in Utah. There's different deal flow. I'm seeing deals from California. I'm seeing deals from Arizona, from Utah, from Colorado because of Techstars Y Combinator. And I want to diversify my portfolio. So getting into these different investments, I can have better chances of success having a larger investment round. Influence.vc only shows up as the only entity on the cap table. The cap table is like where you show ownership in that business. And so it's been exciting. I had a slow start trying to figure out, okay, where am I going? What am I doing? What is my core focus? And essentially the one-liner is, if there is a tech or a product company that can utilize influencers to grow, I want to look at that business.
Okay. So I was going to say, what's your
who I invest in.
Thesis, or what are you looking for? And it's one that in influencers' participation, besides just the money, can help move the needle. Like they have an audience that could benefit from this particular product or service, and kind of an easy way for them to bring a bunch of sales and some new revenue to the business. Yeah.
So our last investment that we did as a group together was with Pura. And Pura, they're a very large company now. Very large is relative, but in the startup ecosystem, they're quite large. They've got this consumer product. It's in the fragrance space. And
so we have like 5 or 6 around our house.
Yeah, right? And they're doing a good job with it. From an influencer standpoint, there's a lot of room for them to grow. And so, getting involved with that business as an investor, I want to be able to help them scale even more by leveraging how to work with influencers, maybe making some intros and connections for them to do it. And then we get to go along for the ride. I look at it as the more expertise I can bring to the table and help these investment portfolio companies, the more I can secure that investment's success. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm getting invited to join some of these rounds that maybe otherwise I wouldn't get into. So that's been helpful.
So a quick question about these influencers that you've worked with, and maybe even think about this from your own mindset. You were unique in that by the time you became an influencer, you had already owned and had been on the giving side of equity in a couple of businesses. But a lot of these influencers, this is like the first thing that they've ever done. And so when they start, it feels like it's all about the cash, right? Like I want money right now. And it is because they kind of want to level up. They want, better car, better house, better clothes, travel, like whatever it is. How has it been for you to educate them on the value of ownership, the value of equity? And do you think that's shifting towards people playing more of the long game? And what's helping some of those attitudes sort of shift?
I'm just getting started. So the educational side, so on influence.vc soon will be even like free content, maybe some courses, paid courses on helping not just influencers. I hope to educate. Okay, let me back up. One of the core values I find in myself, like one of the missions I feel like God has given me here on this earth, is to help people with self-reliance. And I know that word, we don't use that very often, but like I want people to be able to self-sustain themselves and their families. Yeah. So much so that they have abundance that they can help. They can help other people.
They can turn around and pay it forward.
And give, And because that's a big part of me. That's who I am. And entrepreneurship and investing, I think, are some core fundamental principles to help people live in that abundant space and to become more self-reliant. So with influencers specifically, a lot of them, it happened on accident. They didn't necessarily mean to do it, especially in the earlier days. Like it just happened. And so being an entrepreneur is a new thing. They didn't really know what that meant. And so I feel like helping they're now entrepreneurs, influencers turned entrepreneurs, to know how they can diversify in not just their own businesses, but maybe having equity into multiple companies, knowing that you can invest and that is a longer term, longer term return. But it saves you from when YouTube pulls the plug. Yeah. Or if Facebook's algorithm changes, or if Instagram all of a sudden says, we don't like you anymore and you drop. Yeah. Like these influencers are beholden to these other platforms. And we know very well when we built a platform, our company, based on a LinkedIn setup, and LinkedIn was like, nope, pulled the plug. That was devastating for our business. Yeah. I want to make sure that they know that they can build more than just doing their social stuff. Yeah. And hopefully that helps. So
it feels like, and please correct me if I'm wrong, my observation about influencers, and I'm not one, so again, this is just an observation, is that even the ones that are gaining a tremendous amount of popularity, it feels like a professional athlete or a movie star or a rock star. They have a narrow window of time that they are going to be relevant and interesting, and the topic that they're doing is cool, or whatever. It feels that only a small percentage of them can turn that celebrity status into like a really long-term kind of sustainable brand. Most of them are going to have like that their moment in the sun. And so from that perspective, it feels like the stuff that you're trying to educate them around, like, hey, get paid. Like, we're not saying put all of your eggs in the equity basket, but if you don't play the long game, and if you don't have long-term investments in a lot of these, and what better investments to make than one than you can personally help influence the outcome. Is that accurate?
Absolutely.
Is that kind of what you see?
100%. Because, you've got the influencers 5 to 10 year window, right? Lifespan. Now, some will break out of that, right? Some will become the next Oprahs and whatevers. But for the most part, it's 5 to 10 years where you do stay relevant. And most of them have a specific expertise. And if they don't keep up on that expertise and keep going with the times, I mean, we've all seen it. It was that Facebook, and then it was Instagram. Now it's YouTube, and then TikTok. And now what's the next? Yeah. We don't know, but there's going to be a next. Yeah. And can they stay relevant through all those platforms? And it's really hard. I've watched really good people and good friends stuck on a certain platform.
AI influencers.
And AI,
who knows? Influencers even going to be real?
I know, honestly.
I mean, I have an opinion about it, but it's crazy to think about.
There's a lot that's going to happen in the future, and we just don't know what it looks like. Yeah. I've watched these really, really good friends and good human and good souls that were reliant on one platform for their income. And the algorithm changed. They became irrelevant and literally devastated themselves financially. And it's not their fault, other than they just didn't diversify. Yeah. And it's hard because most don't know how to diversify. And so some start businesses on the side or attempt to start business on the side. Some will go onto other platforms. All I'm saying is that a percentage of everyone, not just influencers, but everyone's net worth should be based on investments. Yeah. And if you're planning for the long term, to where you don't have to work in the future if you don't have to, making these key investments, equity is one key area. Obviously, real estate's another, and public stocks are another. Yeah. Have a diversified portfolio that you hear all the time. Yeah. Is going to help secure your future financially and help you to stay self-reliant so that you can continue to share that abundance with others. I just really hope in my little segment of this world, I can teach the principles of investing, of entrepreneurship, and make sure people know the value of equity. And equity, yes, it doesn't give you cash right away, and some equity goes away.
Oh, so going back to that,
but it can grow.
20x. Over what time period was the Gab? Has the Gab thing grown? So like that?
If I remember right, I think it was 2019 that the check went in.
Okay.
2019, 20. I think it was.
So
19.
We're only talking about like 4 years, like 20x.
4 to 5 years.
So admittedly, not all deals are like that. Like that is an anomaly. That's an outlier. They have a phenomenal product that just becomes like almost a necessity. Like it's so needed. And they've got a great marketing strategy. They've got a phenomenal team. Like they have kind of all of those elements to be really successful. So aside from that, how do you yourself, and then how do you help other influencers choose good companies to be a part of? Like, is there a criteria that you use to evaluate that? How do you think about that?
And I'll clarify too. So with this syndicate, which is my group of investors, influencers is just a very small segment of that. Most of them are entrepreneurs. They've built and sold companies. They're accredited investors, and they're able to write checks to come along with me. Yeah. So influencers as our investors is a small subset, and I'm hoping to educate to help that percentage grow. Yeah. So the syndicate itself at influence.vc, you can apply to become a member of the syndicate. That way you see the deal flow that's coming. And so go to the influence.vc website. What I'm trying to do is I look for a few different criteria. Primarily, it's all people. I invest in people first because that relationship with the person, their background, their criteria. I love repeat. I keep hitting this. Repeat founders. Now, I've invested in first-time founders, but I love repeat founders.
How do you get to know someone well enough to make that judgment?
So
do you spend a lot of time with them before you make an investment?
It depends. If I didn't have a previous relationship with them, I would ask if somebody is cold emailing me or LinkedIn me right now, DMing me there. That's not the right way to go meet an investor. I'm just going to put it out there right now. The way to get in touch with an investor is through a referral. That investor will put you at the bottom of the list if you're cold. If you come in through a respected referral, you go to the top of the list. Literally the top of the list. Yeah. My new executive assistant, Morgan, she is amazing. I had a stack of resumes when I put it out there that I was looking for an EA. She reached out to me on LinkedIn cold. I never even saw it. So she looked at my LinkedIn contacts. She saw somebody that she had previously worked as an EA for who was a mutual friend. Okay. She reached out to that friend, said, "Friend, would you refer me?" And he was like, "Absolutely, you're a rock star." So he calls me up. "Bubba, you gotta meet Morgan. You have to. She's amazing. I worked with her back in the day. She was incredible. What do you think?" And I was like, bottom of the pile, top of the pile. Hired her literally within that same week. Yeah. All of the other application, I'm talking, this is hiring, works for hiring, just like it works for investing. Yeah. She went from nowhere to be seen to the top of the list and hired in 7 days. Wow. Investments, I think, are the same. Yeah. If somebody like yourself refers me a deal and Dave says, "Look, Bubba, I've looked into this deal."
Here we go. Now I just became your deal screener. Everyone's
You're my scout.
Blow me up.
I'm building a scout program. No, so the reality is, like, in the venture capital world, there is this thing termed a scout. It's kind of like, the athletics, right? Sports. Yeah. And I'll share part of my upside on the carry side of it. So if people are bringing me deals and I respect and have a relationship with that person, I may not know the founders of that opportunity, but I know you. Yeah. And I'm going to put weigh and trust your opinion of that company, and they might go to the top.
Because you also know that I wouldn't bring you a deal unless I thought it was going to be a mutual, like a really great fit.
There's relationship capital at risk. Yeah. And so if you are looking for an investor and that investor is not willing to make the introduction, they're not willing to put their relationship capital at risk in making that intro. And you know what? Don't fault them for that. Yeah. Because not everybody is the right fit to receive venture capital investment. And so get a referral, though. That's just like key tip number one. If you want to talk to venture capitalists or angel investors, get referred in. Yeah. You can try the cold contact. And if you don't have a mutual relationship, go build one. Yeah. And I know it seems like such a long-term investment, but literally that is the way to get to the top of the pile. So people first. I want to make sure that they have a large enough market, even if they're starting with something that's maybe smaller, they have a clear path to a large market, so they can start with a niche and then expand. And then I want to see the product. Is the product, has it been well built? Can it be rebuilt if it needs to be? Who's behind the product? Who built it? And user experience is big for me. I also prefer post-revenue companies because when I bring them the social media kind of playbook, here's how you work with influencers, this is how you do it. This playbook, it can't come into effect well enough until you have revenue.
Yeah.
And so if you're pre-revenue, and yet I have written checks into pre-revenue companies, but it's preferred that it's a repeat founder. It's preferred that they have revenue.
Yeah.
It's preferred that there's some kind of relationship. And then preferred is that I can then bring that expertise of influencers to help it grow.
Yeah.
Whether it's a consumer product company or a tech company, even B2B, you've got LinkedIn influencers. They haven't been tapped very well yet.
Yeah.
I think that's something that'll be on the rise in the future.
It is interesting because both you and I used to talk about this together. It is frustrating, admittedly, as an entrepreneur, this catch-22 where most investors, rightly so, want to invest post-revenue. They want to invest in something that's already starting to work. Yeah. And as an entrepreneur, like, I just need money to get to that point a lot of times, right? Now, not in every case. In fact, today, more than ever before, in fact, way more than even when we were building, it is easier to get some kind of product off the ground, right? Without a ton of capital. Yeah. And sometimes without any capital, like depending on, how you do it and what type of product it is. But there is this frustration that it feels like a catch-22 often is like, well, who's gonna bet on me to help me get to revenue, to help get those next set of investors in? If sometimes it feels like everyone's waiting on the sidelines, right? Because you're like,
totally,
I got to get proof, but how do I get to that proof? And it can be tricky.
It's a predicament.
So don't give up. And entrepreneurs out there, you just got to figure out really creative ways to get to that early market fit.
Last tip: if you're having struggles getting a venture capitalist to write you a check, because they're going to be more sophisticated, and so they're going to require more, and they're going to be super picky because everybody's coming to them with their deal. So one of the options is to go to the Triple D, doctors, dentists, and dummies. I hate to say that, but I'm just going to put it out there.
All my doctor and dentist friends are like, how come we keep getting lumped in with the dummies?
I know, but then you have friends.
We were the smart guys.
Friends, family, fools. So you got the triple F, the triple D, friends, family, fools, doctor, dentist, dummies. Now, I'm not saying doctors and dentists they're extremely intelligent. Some of them maybe haven't had as much venture capital experience or angel investing experience. And so I'm just saying that's maybe one way to get something off the ground. There's a lot of grants that you might be able to find in the government side.
There's business pitch competitions.
There's competitions to win money. Yeah. And the reality is if you can just hustle and get it done without a ton of costs, you'll be better in the long run. And if you don't have to raise money at all, don't do it. If you don't have to raise, don't do it. Yeah. Because if you can bootstrap, that's the terminology for bootstrapping, is when you don't have any investors. By all means, do it. And then you can keep that ownership. Now, if you feel like you can grow faster and beat competition, or if you have certain technology you have to build in order for this thing to come to life, then you may need an investment. But I would suggest, I gave this tip on another podcast, but if you're a first-time entrepreneur, you've never done this before, and you're really wanting to go to market, I would suggest starting with a service-based company. Mm-hmm. I feel like a service-based company is allows you to learn the principles of business that maybe you haven't learned before, of revenue minus expenses equals profit. And if you work profitably, then you can invest more in the business. Sometimes when you raise capital, it gives you this false sense of what's going on because you have money in the bank, but you haven't generated a profit yet. And you have to be a lot more disciplined and understand where that money is going and what it's doing for you, and to have it convert into profit before your money runs out. That I like to suggest service-based companies for the first-time entrepreneur. Even if it's a window washing business, I don't care what you do. You at least learn the fundamentals of business and you can survive on profit. Save up a little bit of a nest egg. Use that to start your business. And that'll give you a little bit more traction before you come talk to investors like myself.
I love it. So on an end here with this last question is, now that you've given equity, you received equity, how do you think about coaching an entrepreneur about sharing or giving their equity, like, would you say we try to use the term strategically generous, because now we at Awesome have removed all the physical barriers or the legal barriers or the paperwork barriers. Now it's just kind of a pure philosophical and strategic thing. We have a ton of research and data that says people who have ownership change. Their behavior changes. This ownership mentality, whether it's an employee or a partner or a customer, as an influencer, your mentality shifted with Gab as you started to see like success and you had ownership. It wasn't just a transactional thing that you were getting paid for. How do you talk about that from the perspective of the owner who's giving out that ownership?
I would start with the end in mind. If you're building a company to sell, or if you're building a company to hold, that's two different strategies. If you're building a company to hold and never to sell, then equity is going to be a tough sell, because you bring on employees. The only way they get liquidity is if you exit. And if you're never going to exit, that ownership doesn't do anything. So you may look at profit sharing. And that way you can at least be paying them if the business continues to grow.
We do that too, by the way.
Yes.
Did you know that?
No. Is that new?
Yeah. We
I
added
love
the profit
that.
sharing because
Of this.
the businesses who are like, well, this business is never going to sell. Equity doesn't mean anything. We're like, use the equity as kind of the scorecard that says when we do quarterly profit sharing, this is how much everybody gets. Instead of the old-fashioned way of doing profit sharing is title or salary or longevity, things that kind of don't necessarily pattern match directly to how someone's creating value. So if you're using a performance-based equity platform and you tie that to profit sharing, we think that's the best of both worlds. And so, I didn't know if
That's
you
awesome.
knew that
I
we
didn't know
kind of
that.
added that. Yeah.
Product update.
Yep.
So you've got that from if you're not going to exit the business and it's just a lifestyle business for long term.
Then profit sharing.
Profit sharing is the way to go, because equity is not going to help anybody. It's just paper, and paper's not valued unless it's acquired.
Yeah.
But if you are going to exit at some point, start with the end in mind. What are you trying to accomplish? Do you want to exit for $10 million or $50 million or $100 million? And of course, you can say whatever you want. Then you have to build a plan to actually get there. And in that plan, you need to carve out, to me, a large chunk of equity in an employee pool, which is going to be given to key employees who have helped you along the way. That employee pool, and then you have your founders. Obviously, your founders first. Your employee pool comes right after that. And then you've got strategic equity plays like we've talked about with influencers, celebrities, strategic partners, things like that. But if you don't plan for it up front, it may be a shocker if you're recruiting somebody like I did with Dave, to hand them this huge chunk of equity if you didn't plan for that. Yeah. And so having a plan up front, and let's say you're already in the business 5 years and you didn't give out equity, you can still do it. And, meet with your attorney and talk about what's fair and what's right for that person or that group of people. But then look at a platform like Awesome to make the distribution of this equity or profit share, because it'll help you get over all the legal and all the transactional issues and tax things that you may not understand how to get through. And it can be more strategically placed with a platform like that. So hopefully that helps.
Yes, super cool. In fact, thanks for the plug. And it was kind of fortuitous. We actually didn't pre-plan that was going to be an opportunity for us to talk about the profit sharing component of that. But Bubba, so much mad respect and love for you, and so glad that we were able to get you on the podcast. You already kind of teased this, but I'll give you another chance to do it. How do people get in touch with you? Apparently, if you want Bubba to invest, you have to reach out to me first, and I've got to screen you, and then I will introduce you to Bubba if you pass the criteria.
Dave is my newest scout for Influence.vc.
That's right. But how Influence.vc online, on socials,
LinkedIn.
do you have,
LinkedIn by
is
far is the best. Yeah, go to LinkedIn. There's not too many Bubbas on there, so go to Bubba Page, Page. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. If you want more of a personal flair, then go to Instagram. It's just Bubba Page on Instagram. I've got the Twitter.
He's got 25 kids or something.
I do have 8 kids, 4 boys, 4 girls.
They're awesome, by the way. I love all those kids.
It is so much fun. But yes, please reach out to me that way. If you're looking to be, if you're a founder and you want somebody like me to invest, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. But if you send me your pitch cold, you're probably not going to be seen. So try to find somebody within my network and I've got 22,000 folks on LinkedIn. Somebody within your network has got to be connected to somebody in my network.
Yeah.
In some way, shape,
Kevin Bacon's
or form.
even in there somewhere.
Somewhere in there, right? Yeah. Within 6 degrees.
Yeah.
Find somebody there. If you're an entrepreneur or an investor of some kind, you can also apply to be a scout. Because obviously I've got a relationship with Dave. I would absolutely look at deals that he sends my way, and I would want to share some of the carry with you on that. Yeah. So if you want to be a scout, go to influence.vc. There's an application there. You can sign up to be a scout, and then we can share some of the carry, which is like kind of a bonus when the deals are acquired or sold. Let's hear what else. Oh, if you're an influencer and you're wanting to be a part of the syndicate, or you're an entrepreneur or an investor want to be part of the syndicate, apply on influence.vc. It's an invite only right now, but with applications we can determine and invite you if it's the right fit. So
okay, one last thing.
Okay.
Recent investment or investments that you can talk about that you're excited about that you want to promote?
Absolutely. So Phi is our current investment that we're doing right now.
Okay, that's Scott Paul and Kirk Ouimet.
And Kirk Ouimet. So this is a business it's in the AI space, and I know everybody's in the AI space, but it's with a repeat founder. He sold his last company to Snapchat. I believe it was $54 million. He has, got money, a scout check from Sequoia, Menlo Ventures, Kelly Slater, the professional surfer. Like he's got a few, head of product at Discord, head of product at Meta, head of product at Snap, are all investors.
Scott Paul, famously known around here at least, and mostly online as Bitcoin Jesus.
That's right.
And Kirk might be one of the most knowledgeable people about AI that I've ever talked to.
Yeah.
Super smart guys and pretty influential both, right? In their respective rights. Okay, Phi. So you're in Phi.
So we've got allocation in their current round.
And are they still raising? Do they want more investors?
This is it. So my syndicate has a little bit of room left for people to come in.
All right. So if you're interested in that,
reach
longevity, health, all fueled by AI, get involved, get in touch with Bubba.
Yeah. Hit me up. LinkedIn is a great way. If you're interested, hit me. You can also do the contact form on influence.vc. We can get you involved.
Okay.
You do have to be an accredited investor at this point. And you can see online how to do that. I'll probably even put up a free course or content of how to become. Because you used to have a net worth standard or an income standard, and now there's other ways. The SEC has put out there. You can take some courses they put out or create an LLC or things like that. So
okay. Any others?
Yes, but I can't talk about them yet.
Okay.
They haven't gone public yet. So I have, meaning gone public, I have not announced them.
You can't announce it yet.
Yeah. But the luckily right now as an investor, the pipeline, the deal flow is massive.
Yeah.
So being able to cherry pick what I think are the best deals is what I want to take to my network, my syndicate.
Cool.
So it's fun. I'll keep you up to speed.
All right. Thanks for coming on, man.
Thank you for having me.
This is great.